starting to have people who are interested in hearing more from other regions and thinking about whether or not we should try and do this with UNDP elsewhere, or how this might be a model for the future, other places. And of course, Willie's gotten a lot of great traction with the sense of journalism and also expanding that. But with that, I'll just turn it over. I guess we'll start with Maria, if you want to kind of update us on how things are going for you.
Maria, you're muted.
You're muted.
Like this? Do you hear me?
There you go. Yeah. Perfect.
Okay. My name is Maria. I'm working for UMedia project in Ukraine, and since January I'm working also for this pilot project, which is called Open Budget. And I'm going to share a short presentation with you. Just a moment. I will open it. And do you see it?
Yep.
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay. So I will briefly update you on this open budget initiative. It was planned for 6 months, and it is in cooperation with the United Nations Development Program. Our timeline is February-August, and we planned 3 each workshops and a training for journalists. Unfortunately, we couldn't start the project in January due to political crisis, so we launched it in March. And in March, 3 municipalities were selected. You can see their names on the top, and they're hard to remember and pronounce, but I prepared a map of Ukraine, so you can see where territory these regions come from. As you can see, unfortunately, all of the regions are from
Maria?
Western Ukraine.
Maria, see the first slide.
The first one?
Yeah, we're still on the title.
Can you see now 3 municipalities?
Nope.
No.
I'm switching on. I don't know. Oops.
Do you have
Does it work now?
No. Do you have it in PowerPoint in a presentation mode?
No, I'm slowing it as slideshow.
Okay, now we see it.
Now we see it.
We see it.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Yep.
All right, now it works.
Okay, can you see the map?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so these are 3 regions that we are working with. They are all in Western Ukraine, and originally we planned to engage regions from different parts of Ukraine, like West, South, and North, but unfortunately, due to the political crisis, like only Western regions agreed to participate in this project. And the pilot was launched to address the gap created by the lack of access to municipal budget and data. And the pilot takes a 2-pronged approach to equip target municipalities with tools for budget visualization and to train data journalists and bloggers how to use visualization tools in their reporting. So citizens have a better awareness of local budgets and how they can influence it. Okay? And can you see the map now?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, okay, so I'm moving to the next slide. And in April, we had 3 workshops in every city which were selected. It was a 2-day each workshops. I will show you some pictures. And during these workshops, we gathered journalists, civil activists, and workers of financial departments of those cities. Okay, and during this 2-day workshop, we covered the following topics. They are budgeting principles, basic understanding of data handling and interpretation techniques, so how to visualize the data. And in the end of the second day, we had like 2 or 3 hours for prototyping, so they could dream and create some projects that would help their communities to better understand the budget, how it is formed, and what are the expenses, and what expenses come from government, from city council, and who controls the budget, and how the citizen can control the budgets themselves. I will show you the pictures, how it was looked like. Okay, are they appearing?
Nope.
No, we're still on the map.
Okay, probably it will come in a few minutes, I guess. So totally in each workshop participated from 15 to 20 people, and it was really nice experience for them and for us as well, because this was the first time the workers of financial department talked to activists and journalists, and they could hear what kind of data those people want to know from the municipalities, because all those municipalities, they actually do have open budget on their website, but it is presented in Excel format, and it's so confused and so unreadable that if you don't understand anything in budget, you will not be able to get any data from it. Okay, so any pictures now?
Nope.
No.
But we like the map.
Is it just the delay?
Maybe, maybe.
I think it needs to.
But my voice comes okay, right?
Yeah.
On time.
There's a delay the voice and the picture.
Yes, a long way from Ukraine to the States.
Oh,
There we
I
go.
don't know.
pictures.
Okay, we see the
Yay.
pictures.
Each workshop.
Yeah, now we can see the pictures.
Okay, so those were each workshops in every city, and in the beginning, when we wrote this pilot project, we thought that each community will develop a unique tool that will be used only by them for their municipality. But after the prototyping, we realized that people actually think the same way, if I might say so, and they are creating practically the same prototypes. So we consulted with our partner UNDP, and we decided that we should go with one unified tool that will be open sourced, and that every municipality that is eager to open their data and eager to be proactive, they will be able to use it. I will be later talking about that a little bit more. Our second approach was to train journalists from selected municipalities how to write about local budgets using open data. And our training was last week. We gathered up to 15 journalists for a 2-day training in Kyiv. And we had 2 trainers, one of them on economy and on budgets, and the second one, Oleg, you know him, Oleg Hominok, he taught journalists on data visualization and tools. I don't know what slide can you see now? Training for journalists, no?
We're still on the workshop, but don't worry, it will come.
Okay, it will come later. So we had this training for journalists, and I would probably go to results and impact that we had. In Ivano-Frankivsk, for example, there were some young journalists who immediately prototyped Ivano-Frankivsk budget, and you will later see how it looks like, and there will be a link, and maybe I will send this presentation so you can go and see how they made it. So it's already first step towards the budget visualization in the city. As far as I said before, a dialogue was launched between local authorities and civic activists, and also finance department workers. They, they heard from people what they want to see and what they want to know about budgets. We also, with our UNDP partners, understood that a unified tool has to be developed and has to be launched instead of different tools for different municipalities. And our next steps during June and July a platform will be developed to share budget information, and this will be open sourced, and we will also motivate and encourage city councils to use it, and we'll try to coordinate the filling up the platform with updated budget data, though it was not in the project description. And there were some challenges that we faced during the project. First of them is political crisis that is still unfortunately goes in Ukraine. And sometimes it is hard to plan anything considering the events that is happening now. And also we found out that it is difficult to engage people into an activity that lasts more than 2 days. And we have to, for the further, or maybe if we scale up the project, we have to think for, I don't know, better motivation or search better for motivated people, and maybe to think about some public awareness campaign that tells people that open budget is important and they can influence it, because here people, for this topic is relatively new for Ukraine, so there is not a big demand for this kind of information and seminars and trainings. And yes, these are the lessons learned, this public awareness campaign. And we also understood that systematic dialogue between local authorities, city council members, journalists, and civic activists has to be supported, probably by donors and media organizations. And we also thought of including students and experts into this dialogue. Also, we saw that a big demand for such info sessions occurred all over Ukraine. And actually, after each workshops happened, UNDP received some requests from other municipalities to participate in that kind of project. And also a 2-day initiative is, on one hand, it's hard to engage people for 2 days, but on the other hand, it's not enough to tell about budgets and about visualization and have some time for prototyping. So we thought that it had to be split. 1 day, for example, or 2 days just on budget information, the other 2 days on data visualization, and so on forth. Okay, I'm done with my presentation. I don't know what slide can you see? But I guess I can send it to you later.
Yes.
And if you have any questions, I'm ready to answer them.
Any questions?
I do. Maria, I'm interested in knowing if in between the different municipalities there was a difference in the information that they wanted to see from their budget, or if also the information that they wanted to see was kind of the same or very similar across different municipalities.
Well, the first thing that I have to say is that here in Ukraine, local budgets are really strict, and I mean some of the expenses are directly operated by the government, so local citizens cannot influence it at all. For example, such areas as medicine or education. And practically in every municipalities, people were interested in such kind of things as roads, because roads in Ukraine are really bad, about communal services, you know, like gas, electricity, water supply, those kind of things, and city construction areas like parks and pavements and green zones. So people were interested in those kind of questions.
Thanks. I also have another question, which is, what did you see as being the biggest problem that journalists had? Was more related to using specific technologies to visualize the data and not knowing those technologies, or was more related to looking at the data and understand what the data is actually saying, or even choosing which data you're actually going to use to visualize a specific issue?
To my mind, the biggest problem of Ukrainian journalists is that here journalists are writing about everything. They are not focused on specific topic, like I am an economy journalist, so I am an environmental journalist. So it's for most of them who came for the project, they knew something about budgets, but it was a real inspiration for them to hear all that detailed information, how the budget is formed, what are the principles, how citizens can influence it. And also here journalists, they think if they add some beautiful arrows and circles, it will make their story better. They do not realize that analysis is 80% of success, and visualization is just 20% of their work. So I think it's still a big work here to be done on that understanding. Do you see the point?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Totally.
absolutely.
Can I ask, how were they covering the budget before, if they were? And have they gone back and thought about previous ways that they covered budgets and how they might want to do it differently?
Some of them are writing about budgets, but that was plain text. And for example, they made comparisons of 2013 budget compared to 2014 budget, like what are the numbers, how it was changed, that kind of things. And now after the training, the training was last week, so I don't think any of them wrote any article yet.
Yeah.
But of course, I will monitor their work, and I ask them to send me the articles later. And we are planning also to do the content analysis of their work. So if they have written previously, we will compare how it was changed due to the training.
I have another question, Maria. Sorry. You said that it is one of the lessons learned was that it's important to have a dialogue, that it's an ongoing dialogue in between the authorities and the media. Did you find that that dialogue was actually easy? So were the people from municipalities and government actually kind of like happy or at least willing to talk about what they do, to talk about the budget, and to share this kind of information?
Interesting situation was in 2 cities. The workers of financial department, during the first day, they were really skeptical about that event, and it was seen like they were forced to go to this education. But on the second day, they understood that it's for their, I don't know, better life, and they saw that nobody will blame them for bad work, so they were ready to cooperate and talk. And in one city, it was the full understanding from the first moment, and the people were really interested in each other, and they were really interested to hear what is there in financial department, how it works actually. And financial workers were interested in journalism and what is the information they can provide for journalists.
Yeah.
Great. Great. So with regard to moving forward, it sounded like you were talking about developing a new platform
Yes.
later in the summer. With regard to what you see now as the evolution of this pilot, is the current funding going to cover all the things that you're thinking about, or are you thinking about a second stage that would demand more funding?
Well, we are now planning to use the funds that we have, and I think that this will be enough to cover this one tool that will be created open source. And we are now talking to Internews Europe about writing a concept note for European Commission on open budget project. I don't know, just a discussion stage, but it might be developed into a bigger project for Ukraine.
Okay. Very good. Well, keep us informed, and we'd be glad to contribute to that, and also, you know, at the same time, look at how this might be. As I mentioned, there might be some other places looking at a similar approach. So we'd love to talk to you more about that another time. But that's great news.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
questions from Maria?
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you very
Thank
much. Great news on how that's moving. All right, so I guess we're ready for you, Willie.
All right. Oops. How's it going, everybody?
Good. How are you?
Oh, doing pretty well. Enjoying this call from the comfort of my bedroom, so I appreciate that. Thank you for everybody joining today. So, as you know, we've been working on a sensor project, and this has been a pilot that's gotten a lot of heat. And so I'm happy to share where we've been going with this and what our current status is. And, you know, just before we launch into it, I have a couple of the things here with me, including this little piece, which is the actual dust sensor that we've been talking about, and I'll go into that a bit more in a second. And also this one, which is this black box, is a noise sensor. I'm going to turn it on now just to see how loud I am over the course of this conversation. So here we go with that. So I'm going to start with sharing of the screen. So we've been working on this sensor project really for the last, I'd say, 6 months in earnest. Are you guys seeing the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And we've been aggregating all of the material about our project on the EJN website. So this is under the program section under citizen science and sensors. And that's really how we're conceptualizing a lot of this stuff, is that it's not just about these pollution monitors themselves, but it's also we're stepping into science and we're stepping into crowdsourced science, and we're really trying to figure out how do we engage with these different communities. And I think that that's probably the best narrative about this pilot, and what we've learned the most is how to start engaging the scientific community and also the developer community on projects like these. So if you're looking for kind of the hub to start finding everything, come to this page and you can see we've started outlining how we've built the noise sensor from design to sourcing parts to the schematics to different water quality sensors, the tests of the Dustuino, and some background materials about the hows and the whys. So we've been aggregating a lot here. And so where I'm really interested in starting with you guys at this point is the sourcing of parts. So we're talking about building devices, actual physical objects that we're distributing throughout the world. And for Internews and for myself, and I know for the journalists that we're working with, this is a whole new world. Is how do you source these physical products? How do you manage these supply chains? How do you identify where to get materials, and how do you ultimately control cost? So where we started was basically talking with designers, with hardware developers, and getting a price list and a parts list, and looking at the various things, and then going to a site like this one, SparkFun, where they sell these things, and they'll ship them to you in certain quantities, or basically whatever you're looking for. This one's based in the U.S. This one is Seed Studio. This is another one that's based in Shenzhen, and I'll go into this a bit more as we continue developing. So for us, it was a big start of looking at where do we actually get these materials, and how do we have a clear supply chain so that we can implement these projects. The other side was working with the scientific community. So right now this is the Public Lab website, and Public Lab is a group of civic scientists. So people who are university trained, some are not, some are more focused on advocacy and NGO, but they're all interested in environmental data collection for environmental justice issues and gathering of evidence. They became famous around the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, and we've been working with this community here, so you can quickly ask questions about the Dustuino. You can get tied into message boards where people are discussing how to know what's in your air, all these different kind of, how do you start creating a community of users around these things. And also one of the big things that we did as a result of this pilot project is we worked for this critical step right here, test results. So we worked with one of the scientists that we've been working with from the University of Washington, a man named Edmund Sato, to do a teardown of this device. So this is that thing that I showed you earlier. It's the particulate matter sensor, and basically what it does is it shoots light into a chamber, and it has a reader which can tell you how much dust that, you know, when you see like a ray of sunlight outside, and it shows you what's in the air. You can see the pollen, you can see things floating in the air that you wouldn't see if that light wasn't shining through it. This basically works on the same principles. So what we wanted to find out was, how does this compare to more expensive equipment that's being used by the EPA and people like that? So this is a peer-reviewed journal article that was published in January, which asked that very question. So what they did is they compared 3 different particulate matter sensors, and they found that the one that we're using, which costs $15 at an hourly interval, provides comparable results in terms of data quality. And for us, that was a huge step forward. That says that there's space here for us really to experiment, but not just create more data, but create data that's viable. And I think that was a real critical step for us. So again, at the this public lab site, you can go around and look at all the different research that people have been doing on different air quality sensors. And there's one that's for like looking at the frac sand. So if you're interested in fracking, you can be putting these things around and start around frac sites and seeing how that's affecting the air quality around specific small industrial sites. Also, people are experimenting around refineries and also around coal trains in the Pacific Northwest. So there's really a lot here in terms of the community side of things. And the last thing that we did here is we posted how to build, why to build, and how to build these devices. So let me just head back to the non-screen share for a second. So what we did is we built basically this component, and this is that thing that I was showing earlier, with this is the sensor node that we had designed and manufactured in Washington State. And then there's this. So this is a Wi-Fi module. So all of those things go together, and what they do is this tells you how much dust is in the air. This records it and logs it, and then this sends it to a computer, to the internet. And what that ends up looking like, let me head back to the screen share, is this. So because we published this tutorials, this is somebody who was not part of our project in Italy, who has been taking these PM10 readings in their home in, I think it's near Florence, so if you look out here, near Florence, and the last reading was 13 minutes ago in terms of how we can share this information. And so we published this tutorial on this Mental Munitions blog and also on the Geojournalism Handbook, and provided some step-by-step material so that it would be easy for people to utilize this stuff. The other piece of the puzzle has been working with EJN's journalists. So a few weeks ago, we all met in Berkeley, California, and Natalie, who's in the room, also attended this. And we brought these monitors, these environmental monitors, to Berkeley. We brought, I think it was 13 journalists, 3 developers, and a scientist and a public health specialist to hang out for a week and talk about how we can implement these things. What would we use them for in our projects? How do we adapt them to local contexts? And so we also went to go visit a particle accelerator. So here's the group. This is everybody in the Berkeley Lawrence Laboratory. Here's James, and I think I'm over here, and there's Natalie. And So this is EJN in physical form. I know we talk a lot about our 4,500 members, but here's actual people, and here's Gustavo in the back right there, the newest EJN staff member. And as a result, we built these. So this is what they look like in final form. And this one is now in Mongolia. And here's the Dustuino and the sensor that I'm using right here, the one that I started with. These are in Buenos Aires. So now we're starting to send them out all over the world. And, you know, this is going to be our big first round of user testing to see how are they, you know, being used, how long do they last, how long do they maintain, how difficult are they to set up in real terms. And so, and you guys can feel free to stop me if you have any questions. I'm going to keep going. But if you have any questions, just feel free to say something. The other part of that event was a public event called Ground Truth and Airwaves, where we brought all kinds of sensor scientists, environmental engineers, mappers, hackers, and journalists together for an afternoon, also at Berkeley, in partnership with Citrus, which is it's an institute that's part of Berkeley. And we discussed sensor journalism. What's the future look like? What's possible? And really that week for me was a lot about inspiration, because ultimately the Dustuino, while it is pretty rad, like it's pretty radical, it's still just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what's possible and what's about to be possible in the next year, 3 years, 5 years. And speaking of what's possible in the next 3 years, and certainly in the next year, as a result of this pilot project and some of the work and the knowledge that we've been acquiring, our partner OECO recently received $500,000 from Google to implement a network of water quality monitors in urbanizing Amazon cities. And so this was a successful, I guess it was like a contest-y kind of thing, and we ended up getting $500,000 to set up these water sensors. And so I really don't want to just talk about the monitors themselves, the physical devices, because ultimately that's going to change, and it's going to develop rapidly. I mean, we all know how quickly technology is shifting, and really we're also just trying to pilot out processes, which I think has been a real great benefit of this pilots project. But we've also been working on, you know, that example from Xively. You know, okay, that's pretty. You can access it from a mobile phone or an internet or your web browser or anything, but how do we interpret it? So what the Ecolab in Brazil has been working on is this system called YBY, and I don't know why it's called YBY, but it's called YBY, and it's basically a way to upload this information and annotate it with stories. And we've worked on this. It's Aguas de Infoamazonia, and it's a way that you can tag these reports and these data to specific locations. And the way that we're doing that is we're working with NGO partners. So there's a lot of questions around who's going to maintain these things, who's going to put them out there, how do we get them back? And so really what we think is, let's be a lending library. Let's have a bunch of these devices, and then journalists or NGOs can go out, they can place them, they can monitor them, they can have a plan, say we're going to look at this neighborhood for 3 months, and then we're going to bring the devices back. And then somebody else can use them. So we're expanding into this community in order to actually operationally be able to handle this kind of a new project. And then these stories can eventually be incorporated into Infoamazonia if they're, you know, reliable, if they're quality, and then we can integrate them into other story platforms. So I want to bring you back really quickly to Seed Studio, because now that we've kind of figured out that these things can be reliable, here, let me go back to my face for a second. So we've figured out that these things can be reliable. we figured out that we can buy them and make them, and we can distribute them. It's certainly not as easy as saying it, but it's possible. We've shown that it's possible. We've shown, and we're building tools that allow us to bring the information back and into a human-readable form, and an actionable form, and a storytelling format. Now, what about that manufacturing again? So if we're going to do this, and if we're going to do this at scale, we don't really want to be a factory. Like, we don't really want to be UPS. We don't want to have, like, you know, a warehouse filled with these things that we can be distributing. So who's going to do that? And how do we partner with businesses that are good at that? Because there are plenty of people that are good at that, and that's how the global economy works. So, like,
Good point.
yeah, that's where we've been looking at this. So that group, Seed.
Really, Laura has a question really quickly.
Just on
Okay.
that, Willie, are there people making these other things? Are there competitors? I mean, I know that there's the EPA's sort of level one, but are there other people who are trying to do just that, trying to make sort of a consumer level version of these kinds of things?
Right. Well, I mean, the biggest and most famous would be Nest, which was just bought by Google for $3.2 billion, which is a at-home carbon monoxide monitor.
Yeah.
So it's basically a fancy fire alarm in your house, so one of those smoke alarms that is able to talk to your phone.
Right.
And that's probably the biggest. There's been some media that's used them in terms of WNYC. In New York, did a cicada tracker last year. That was a pretty interesting project, but everything was built by the consumers. There are now a wide variety of consumer products that are being sold as attachments to iPhones, but for the most part, they're about human sensing, so monitoring your own body. And I know you guys probably are familiar with like the Fitbit and the various bands that you can wear around your wrist and will tell you your heart rate and if you're sleeping and, you know, all these things about you yourself. There's less of a market right now for environmental monitors, but I think that there is the public lab, which is working from a low-cost, accessible angle. So there are things that exist, like we use this other monitor called the Diclose, which is an infrared particulate matter counter to calibrate the sensors that we're using, and it's $300. So, and it's not internet connected. So in terms of, there's various actors in parts of the chain. So there's Nest, which is at-home, high-value consumer product, looks cool, works on something that's pretty traditional, and talks to your phone. There's the mid-range cost, not internet connected, environmental monitors, and then there's also this kind of low-cost, accessible, do-it-yourself kind of communities. But in terms of people who are manufacturing, I think that looking at a group like Seed, which I'll show you in a second, is probably the closest to a competitor or a potential collaborator that exists. So this is stuff that they have, and they have also kits like consumer products. Like here's this quadcopter, micro quadcopter kit that. So the way that it works basically is around this. So like an individual inventor creates a product. They have all of these materials, so all of your designs, your schematics, your parts lists, all of that, a prototype. You send that to Shenzhen in China. They give you an estimate and a quotation. You have to buy at least 100 units. It's better if you can do 500 or more, or like 1,000 in terms of cost. They manufacture, they manage the inventory, and then they also manage the distribution. So all of the logistics around shipping and payments, and then they take a cut of the revenue, and then you get the revenue after their cut. So that's basically what this workflow diagram means. And so,
Willie,
yeah.
So I understand, is the idea then to educate the media how to use these tools, or is that not the goal?
Oh no, it's totally the goal. So that's where we start with these tutorials with the hows and the whys in terms of a big picture, like how would you tell a story with this device? One of the things that kind of came out of the working with the journalists in Berkeley a couple weeks ago was that the skill set for manufacture is a huge gap. So you have to have developers that you're working with and also scientists that are a part of your community as an individual in all of these different countries. So the reason why we can do this is because we have that kind of community around us, and we're actively trying to build that, where we do work with scientists, where we do work with developers. And so I didn't actually manufacture any of these things myself. I asked a guy named Matt Schroyer to do so. I asked a guy named Edmund Sato to do so, and then he provided them. We just provided the funding, they provided the manufacturing, and then we handed them over to the journalists to use in their storytelling. So as we continue to build upon the knowledge base of how do you tell stories with these things, the next big question is how do you actually get these devices? So,
Willie,
does that answer your question?
Thanks, Willie.
Willie, can I ask a quick question about that? So far, the journalists, have they been actually using the data that they're getting from devices to write stories? And if so, do we have a way of seeing what the kind of engagement and impact of that has been? Because it seems to me like one of the key things will be to engage the commercial kind of interest, and the way to do that is to kind of have a groundswell of public kind of engagement and demand for those tools. So it will be sort of like a circular process.
Right. So for me, this stage in the pilot is really about the user testing. Of course, we want people to use them for stories, and we want people to understand the data and what it means and how to use the device. But we're more interested at this stage in improving the device and finding any problems with its use. These things on an individual level, one device will tell a story of one life. So I can look in my house and I can tell you, one example that Matt showed was, there were two. One was you could tell very clearly when someone was cooking bacon in the house because the particulate matter would spike. I mean, that's kind of a little story. Like, how bad is bacon for you? Oh, it's actually bad for your lungs, not just for your belly, or your heart. The other one is with like noise. Like for me, I live next to a fire department, and those fire trucks, they turn on their sirens even if there's no emergency. It's just, their MO is always on. So how do I use that to help me quantify and tell the story of my own life? But for a journalist, I mean, we often have lead characters in our stories, and we could use it that way, but from a data reliability standpoint, you want like a couple weeks of a stationary monitor on a neighborhood level in a mesh that tells, what we want to do is use satellite information to identify potential point sources, then deploy a mesh network of these sensors around that point source, and use it as a kind of a clarion call for regulatory action. So that we can put these around a point source and tell a story in a very high resolution way. And for us, that really happens when we get this money from Google and we start playing around with a neighborhood scale, not individual scale. And maybe we can get there by open sourcing all of our designs, like that example of the guy in Italy who just built one of these himself, or the air quality egg who did that, where they just open source the process and let anybody contribute. That's another way to get to larger scale information. But for us to tell a story, we need like at least 20 devices deployed strategically to tell us a story of an area. And I think that's what we're waiting for.
Willie, I have another question. One of the issues that I've faced in some of our projects is specifically when you give someone a piece of technology that they haven't seen before, and you train them on using it, and you spend like a couple of days with them using that piece of technology, and then they take it and go off to their place.
Right.
The time, the time in between when they've done the training and when they actually start using the tool is normally key, in the sense that they may forget some of the stuff that they've learned during the training. They may, because they've not seen the technology before, if something gets broken, they don't know what to do, or they kind of like stuck, or it's just that non-being familiar with using that technology over time. And I'm curious to see, because I mean, a sensor in itself is quite a piece of technology, right? Even if it's low cost and as simple as possible. So I'm curious if you've seen any kind of like preliminary result on that, and how do you see the interaction in between those journalists and the technology itself?
Right. I mean, we have had success. The journalists in Brazil and Mongolia have started looking at these things and utilizing them quickly. In terms of, like, it's a major, this kind of a project is a time investment that is big beyond its money. At this point, it takes more time than the money that we have. And there's a lot of potential, and I think that it was shown with that Google funding that very quickly we could turn something that's relatively rudimentary into $500,000. But I'd say that our the answer to your question in terms of have people been using it and are we falling into that same trap that you're mentioning, I'd say yes, we're falling into that trap. 3 out of 10 have been using the sensor so far, and it's on us to maintain engagement with our partners so that they do utilize them. We have set up all of the technology beforehand, but we've only got 3 out of 10 actually providing us with data. So yeah, now it's another press to get things going, to keep up the level of engagement. And we're all busy and we all have a million things to do, and this is a time-intense one.
Yeah.
Yeah, Willie, have you done any work to look at how you might engage the journalists more in using these sensors? Not just the journalists, but the communities that the journalists are seeking to serve.
Yep.
Like if we talk about quantified self and all those different little tools that that you mentioned, and then we can talk about sort of quantified community and actually have ownership of that in the communities of interest themselves, and that may be another angle that will be really supportive for this kind of beyond.
So we've got another $20,000 through the summer to work with Frontline SMS on how to build two-way engagement around the results that these monitors are collecting. And also, I mean, I think really the critical question around this work and ultimately all of our work is: are we solving, or are we trying to answer real questions to problems, or like questions that people actually have? So people do have questions about the quality of their air and the quality of their water. And so how do we identify the right partners, I think, is ultimately the big question, because there are people who are interested. And I think the model that we're pursuing is identify NGOs who can be the stewards and who have already engagement with communities and who will be the ones who are actively maintaining these things and coming to us looking to deploy them. And then our job is about managing that flow of information and trying to interpret it in a way that becomes actionable.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Hey, Willie?
Mm-hmm.
This was fantastic. Thank you. It was kind of mind-blowing for me.
So I do have one more piece of information about what's going to happen this afternoon. And so I applied for this. This is in DC in August. Yep, you guys are seeing that. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So this is the Environmental Measurement Symposium, which is being put on by the EPA in the beginning of August. And they have this thing that they're calling Innovative New Technology Showcase. and they're basically picking 15 different technologies to show at EPA headquarters in August, and we're one of the finalists, and I have a discussion with the EPA later today about if we'll be participating in that, and ultimately, let me actually go back to this really fast, because there's something more I want to show you. See this on the side? There's this contributors list.
Mm-hmm.
These people are called the regulated by the EPA. And what that means is they're all the people who are required to provide the EPA with measurements. And if we get even one of these regulated, like an industry, to be interested in these technologies, then that commercial application becomes very real. And the ability for commercial sites who want to show that they are abiding by regulation and can have a public interface with communities that are around the area that are easily accessible without a third party, they can utilize these technologies. Like, for example, we've been talking a lot with our partners in China about, is this possible? And one of the scientists that we've worked with has deployed these sensors in Chengdu and Kunming, and he's done it by working with researchers. And in our kind of brainstorming, like, how would this work, we've talked about how would a real estate company in China use these things to show that the quality of their buildings means that you're safe when you're in your house, because it's very difficult to control air quality outside, and you know, everybody can see already that the air sucks, but people want to know if they're safe when they get home. And so a real estate company could buy 1,000 of these, put it in their high-rise, and give people the ability to monitor their own air quality in their home and say, all right, well, it's safe for me to be here. And they can use that as a sales point. So how do you actually engage with areas where, you know, the ability to put these things out publicly in the environment is not necessarily so easy?
Yeah.
Good.
Anyone has any other question?
Well, are you guys doing anything with sensors and issues connected with drought issues?
Right. So actually, a soil moisture sensor is one of the easiest ones you could possibly make. Essentially, you can do soil moisture sensing with a bit of a battery, and 2 nails. So the way that a soil moisture sensor works is, if there's water in the ground, it conducts electricity better than if there's not water there. So if you try and run a current through the soil, you can tell if there's water in the ground or not, for very low cost. The other thing that's maybe a better way, because you need to set up 1 million of those things if you want to know on like a farm scale. So one of the things that the public lab has recently been doing, let me see if I can pull this up really quick. And I know that we're almost out of time, so I'll try and be quick. Infogram.
Yeah.
Infogram. So are you guys familiar with NDVI as a term?
Nope.
No.
So NDVI is a vegetation index. Basically, the way that light works, or the way that photosynthesis works, is that plants absorb a specific kind of light. It's near infrared, and they reflect green light and red light. So that's why you see things looking green. You can build cameras, so like this one, I'll show you really quick, that can see on the non-visible spectrum. So they can see those wavelengths of light, and you can do a calculation and tell if a plant is water stressed. So this is the first prototype of that. I think it costs like $100, and what this does is it allows you to see how well is that plant absorbing light, how well is it photosynthesizing, and based upon that information you can tell if it's stressed out or not. And one of the major causes of stress is not having water. And you can do this on a larger scale than putting nails in the ground and trying to make a circuit.
Willie, can I ask you one final question? I know there are others who probably have questions. which is, from my perspective, the media has actually created a dynamic where there's massive confusion about what are all the implications of the drought, issues of just taking where California, the South, the North, the role of agriculture, whether or not the issues in Sacramento in terms of people not being required to cut back, etc.
Mhm.
How do you deal with so you get this information, how do you help the media to help the public to understand what would be smart public policies, if that's the right question?
Right. I mean, that's the biggest question, ultimately.
And to me, it's very real because I want to move back to California.
Right. Yeah. In terms of, yeah. Good question. I'm happy to hear your strategy on that one too. I mean, I went to the Skoll Foundation the other week, and they've been talking a lot about what they're looking at, which is deafening echo chambers and shrinking newsrooms. And ultimately, when you're in that kind of a situation, the power of misinformation or confused information is really massive. So when you look at the ability to empower small to medium-sized newsrooms with, real evidence-based reporting style, you can influence. Like one of the partners that we've been working with, a group called Sky Truth, which is based in West Virginia. It's like a team of 5 people. They live out in a small town in West Virginia. They're really good at satellite imagery, and they used to work in the oil and gas industry. So they did an analysis of the Deepwater Horizon surface oil spill, and they said actually it's the amount of oil that's being pumped into the Gulf is double what BP is saying based upon the amount of surface oil that we're looking at. And these are my credentials, and these are the images, and here's my evidence. And they actually got on CNN. So it's when you can actually empower these smaller scale evidence-based, like the ProPublica model. ProPublica is not huge, but they can syndicate. And so we're looking at, that was kind of the discussion with Skoll, is how do we fit in that ecosystem where we can, surface these talented individuals who know their area better than anybody else and get them hooked into mainstream and large-scale publishers and broadcasters as they are cutting back on their staff and they're downsizing due to financial constraints.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, well, that was perfect, Willie. You came right out at 11, and that's really amazing work. And once again, it's really going gangbusters as far as its expansion. And I would really like for all of us, also with Maria, is for us to just continue to think about what the next stage is for these pilots, because in the past we've learned quite a bit about how we've handled these, and I think these are 2 of the more successful pilots that we've ever had. And one of the things we really wanted to be committed to on this round of pilots was to make sure that they did not end with the end of this pilot. And so we are really committed to figuring out what are the next stages so that we can also start to try and find the funding for those along with that. So we'll have follow-up discussions with both of you, and thanks again for all your time and the incredible work that's come out of these. And we'll have further discussions with regard to how we can take it to the next level. Thank you again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Willie,
Maria.
thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
See ya.